Hey there, it's Dr. Justin Marcagiani, and today's talk's going to be on comparing a plant-based diet to a paleo diet. So first off, I have a bias towards a paleo template, if you will. I'm not a fan of using the word diet because diet kind of insinuates lack of flexibility, right? You're either low carb, you're high carb, you're this or that. Where a template, a paleo template, really is referring to nutrient quality, right? No toxins, organic, ideally local, right? Eating foods that our genetics have had time to adapt to. That's kind of like the paleo template in my mind or in my model that I use with my patients in my practice. But again, we can adjust carbohydrates up, down, low, high, and we have flexibility when we're using a paleo template. So we're going to compare this paleo diet slash template to a plant-based diet slash template. Now, before we get started, one thing that's kind of on my mind is there's a massive bias towards vegetables and essentially a bias against anything that's meat or animal based. You see it at Whole Foods with the ANDI, which is the nutrient density scale. It's the aggregate nutrient density index created by Joel Fuhrman. Joel Fuhrman's a vegetarian. Joel's a good guy, but if you look at his index that he created, Christopher Masterjohn did an excellent summary of what the index includes and what it excludes, but you can see what it excludes is all the B vitamins, vitamin A, fat-soluble nutrients, D, E, K, EPA, DHA, all of these vital, super important nutrients, and then what it includes are carotenoids, ORAC levels, and ORAC's kind of one of these things. We know it has antioxidant capacity, but we're not quite sure what that means. Glucosinolates, and even fiber. So you can see it excludes so much more than it includes. And in my opinion, the vitamins and the essential fatty acids are far more important than everything else that he includes. So there's a massive bias off the bat to the average public. Because if I put down some kale in front of a person and said, hey, what's better, this kale or I plop down some liver? The average person would look at the kale and be like, of course the kale. And they'd look at the liver and say, what the heck's that? That's gonna clog your heart. But the truth of the matter is, if we compare liver to any nutrient out there, right? We just use the USDA nutrient index, you're gonna see liver crushes almost every single vegetable or fruit in every single area down the list, from calcium to various minerals, to copper, vitamin C, B12, it kicks it off the bat there, and then all the fat-soluble nutrients, A, D, E, and K. So liver is incredibly nutrient dense, but again, there's a massive bias to the public, and if you just gave them that option, they would think, wow, this kale is the superfood, but really, liver is the superfood. So let's go down the list here. Like I mentioned, there's lots of great studies on this stuff. I'll put a couple in the show notes so you can see it and look at it for yourself. But when we compare to a plant-based diet to a paleo diet, or a paleo template, as I like to call it, we're going to have far better essential fatty acids in a paleo diet. We're going to be getting DHA fats and EPA fats, which are going to be really important to reducing inflammation and for brain health. And you can see the essential fats you're going to get with plant-based are primarily going to be flax. And if you watch my video on fish oil, you're going to see that you have to convert flax downstream from alpha-linolenic acid. We use this delta-6 desaturase enzyme to help actually add carbons onto that 18 carbon fat. And if we have insulin resistance or inflammation, we only can convert 20% of it at best. So off the bat, we're going to be given the paleo template or diet, the benefit there. Now, plant-based inflammation. Well, when it comes to this, if we're eating paleo foods, right? If we're cutting out grains, cutting out legumes, cutting out the extra sugar, and we're eating, let's say, grass-fed meat, extra fishes, right? All these EPA fats, we're going to be reducing inflammation significantly. Now, at the same standpoint, if you're eating a plant-based diet, but you're also cutting out the grains, eating coconut oil, eating avocado, maybe having some flax, maybe having some olive oil, maybe even doing some DHA algae, you could potentially reduce inflammation, and you may not be adding a whole bunch of inflammation, but if you're doing this wrong, if you're eating a whole bunch of, let's say, refined vegetable oils, like soybean, safflower, canola, these are the vegetable oils that are refined. They're much higher in omega-6 fatty acids. So if you're a real healthy vegetarian, you may be okay in the inflammation category, but I see too many people that come into my practice, they're consuming refined vegetable oils that aren't designed to be eaten in that high a quantity, and it's driving up the omega-6 arachidonic acid prostaglandin 2 pathways. Again, watch my video on fish oils and inflammation for more on that. So I have to give the paleo diet a win on that one as well. And if we look at vitamins and minerals, well, I've already talked about the whole ANDI, the aggregate nutrient density index, is massively skewed towards the antioxidants, the glucosinolates, the fiber, and the carotenoids, where it does not look at the vitamins and minerals. Now, again, you're going to get really good vitamins and minerals here if you are consuming low glycemic and non-starchy vegetables. So like if you're doing kale, spinach, your berries, you're going to get really good vitamin and mineral content there. Okay, you're going to do really well on the vitamin and mineral content. But if you're a paleo diet and you're consuming a little bit of liver, any vegan or vegetarian that's watching this and doesn't believe me, I'll put a link below. Go to the USDA site, go to any site that compares the nutrients for liver, right? You have to do it per weight. You can't compare it different weights, different amounts. Per weight, the liver to kale, to carrots, to whatever. I'll put a little scale up here on screen. You will see that liver kicks the butt of that. So if we're doing plant-based and we're doing paleo, right, we're going to be doing some major butt kicking if we're having liver in our diet. So I would give that 2 for the paleo diet if we're consuming liver. A little bit of organ meat in our diet. Okay, and also shellfish is very, very good too. So let's look at carbohydrates. My issue with a lot of plant-based people is they tend to have to combine carbohydrates from different sources. So rice and beans, legumes, lentils, etc. to get a complete protein, because we're missing maybe methionine or lysine, and we're lower on the sulfur amino acids with a plant-based diet. So they have to combine things. They have to get a little bit creative. And the problem with that is, if you take a look at Diana Schwarzwein's book, The Schwarzwein Principle, she gives you an analogy of how much carbohydrate you have to combine together to have a complete protein from rice and beans. So her analogy was, it was somewhere around 70 to 80 grams of carbohydrate have to be combined to get about 15 grams of protein. So when you're consuming a plant-based diet, you tend to go higher in carbs. So if we look at this here, we're going to be high carb here. We're going to be much higher in carbs at a plant-based diet, where here we have the ability to go lower in carbohydrate, because when we eat animal products, we're primarily getting the proteins and the fats without all of the extra carbohydrates. Now, in this standpoint, we can go lower carb on plant-based, and I do it with a lot of my vegan, vegetarian patients by adding in hemp protein, adding in the pea protein, potentially a rice protein if we're not autoimmune. We can even add in free-form amino acids. These are aminos that are already pre-broken down from pea or from whey or from beef, and they're basically ready for your body to absorb. So there's no antigenicity, there's no allergen potential with those. So when we do a plant-based diet, it's easier to go high carb. So that's actually going to be a negative for a lot of people because they're insulin resistant. So this check right here is actually going to be more of a negative than a positive. With a paleo approach, we do have the ability to go lower carb, because our proteins won't come with a whole bunch of carbs, but we also have the ability to ramp up the carbs and add in starches as well. We don't quite have the ability to do that here on the plant-based side unless we do pea protein, hemp protein, maybe some free-form aminos, and maybe rice protein as well. Those are some really good sources there, excluding soy. So again, I give paleo the win on the carb side of it. Antioxidants, well, again, antioxidants are going to be vitamin A, D, E, and K. And if you look at Joel Fuhrman's ANDI scale, he conveniently pulled them out of the aggregate index. He just used carotenoids and he used the ORAC scale. So the ORAC's one part of it, and you'll get some really good antioxidants from kale and other vegetables that are low in sugar and high in nutrition, kale, spinach, asparagus, etc. But again, things like liver, things like shellfish, I'll put another study in the keywords below here. They looked at your nutrient density score, and they looked at all of the various vegetables, meats, and proteins, and they found that shellfish and liver and organ meats in general were higher than everything else. It wasn't even close. So the research even shows this. It just really hasn't caught up into the public sphere, and hopefully this video will draw some more attention to that, and I'll put the references below. So again, I would say you can get good antioxidants with a plant-based diet, but again, the information is mostly skewed. I still think you can do it even better on a paleo template, especially if you're getting fish in there and a little bit of organ meats. You're gonna just kick butt with that. And then protein, like I said, we're definitely gonna be able to get better protein on a paleo approach. The only way we can do it on a plant-based approach to get enough protein, in my opinion, is we have to use protein powders. Because with the powder, all the carbohydrate, all of the lectins, all of the other stuff are tossed to the side, so we're just getting the protein. So you're gonna do much better on a paleo approach. And this isn't factoring in that a lot of people that are plant-based are gonna be consuming lots of grains, which are gonna have gut irritants, potentially cause leaky gut, and have malabsorption components to it, like the oxalates and the phytates, which will bind to minerals. So the minerals that are in there may even be lower because you're not absorbing them because these phytates and oxalates are pulling them out. And lectins, if you will. So if you're being a good plant person, you're a plant-based diet person, but you're cutting out all of those things, that's a good start. That's a really good start in the right direction. Again, legumes can also have some of these lectins that could potentially have some mineral binding capacity. So you really want to make sure you cut out all of those gut irritating foods. Again, I work with lots of vegans and vegetarians, and when I convert them over and just start adding in a little bit of protein, one of the first things we do is just cut out all of the gut irritating things first. And we'll start adding in some free-form amino acids. We'll start adding in some protein powders that I mentioned from pea and hemp and potentially rice, if they can handle it, just to start getting the proteins up. And then we cut a lot of the gut irritating things out. And then one of the first things we'll start doing is maybe adding in just a little bit of fatty fish, or adding in just a little bit of egg yolk. So when you look at their diet, they're 80 to 90%, on their so-called plant-strong diet, but we got about 10 to 20% animal in there, and they start feeling better. They start really coming along. Some may get sicker off the bat because their HCl levels or their enzyme levels are so low because their HCl pumps are turned off, because they're not used to having that kind of solid protein in there. So if they do feel worse off the bat, it automatically tells me they're low in hydrochloric acid, which, again, it's not the animal meat that's causing that problem. The animals, the animal products are just revealing a broken chain in the physiology, and we have to get that fixed. So again, when I convert people over and start them off, they're still 80 to 90% plant-based. You don't have to go 100% all in. You can kind of inch your way in, and I see my patients strongly benefit from that. So again, any questions from this video? If you're needing help converting your diet over or getting your digestion and your energy and your hormones back on track, click on screen or click below to get more information, and make sure you subscribe and share the videos if you're enjoying them. Thanks. This is Dr. J. Have a great day.